Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Caresoft Technology would like to welcome you to our ServiceNow Federal Tech Talk, Assist with ERP, Cloud Migration, and Modernization using ServiceNow low-code apps. Joining us today with ServiceNow, we have Parker Lee, Senior Solution Sales Executive, and Daniel Bowling, Senior Solution Consultant. While I go over a few housekeeping items, please take a moment to answer the polling questions on your screen. Please note that all lines have been muted to reduce any kind of background noise during the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer by the end of the presentation, or we'll follow up with you offline following the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be emailed to you. Just to tell you a little bit about Caresoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider supporting public sector organizations across federal, state, and local government agencies, including education and healthcare markets. At this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to our speakers. Parker, the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Really appreciate everyone joining us today. Parker Lee, Senior Solutions Executive here at ServiceNow. I specialize in helping health and finance related agencies modernize legacy applications, automate manual processes, and centralize all of their important information for decision making. Today, we're going to be talking about Clean Core Enterprise Resource Planning with App Engine, specifically through the lens of SAP migration. But this also applies to any kind of enterprise resource planning that you might think of. So I'm actually not as familiar with Zoom. Let me see if I can see the results of the Q&A. Looks like I can. Excellent. Well, thank you all for answering this. This really helps us understand the type of conversation we need to have. Some people may or may not be as familiar with ERP. Looks like we've got some folks who've been users of ServiceNow. We have one advanced user, but some folks who have some experience as a developer. And it looks like we actually do have a couple of folks that have actually used an enterprise resource planning tool before as a user or as a developer admin. That's very, very helpful for us to know. So to kind of get things started, we will go ahead and talk a little bit about what enterprise resource planning is. It is a very, very broad term. What I like to describe it as anything within what we would call the back office. So in a commercial organization, you have the front office, which is where your customer relationship management or your CRM lives. So that's sales and marketing and customer service and those different organizations. Back office are all the underlying process that make up sort of the logistics, financials of your agency. So this can include supply chain. You're managing any kind of asset moving through warehouses or manufacturing or any facilities or asset management. But it could also include your financials. So your balance sheet, your general ledger, your income statement, your budget preparation. Some people would consider HR to be part of ERP because people are another resource, human capital. But ERP, it's everything that sort of handles those back office functions of tracking any person, place, or thing that moves through your organization that needs to be tracked. And so ERP systems tend to be very, very big, lots and lots of data, and extremely complex, very, very complex over time. As people take their existing SAP or existing ERP or existing Oracle systems and they customize them. It's also often very, very expensive to update, which means that most ERP systems are usually pretty old. They could be 10, 20, 30, or even 40 years old. And so one of the biggest challenges we see specifically from an SAP perspective is that the current SAP Suite 7 software will actually no longer be supported by mainstream maintenance in 2027, and then optional extended maintenance of 2030. And so 2024 is next year. We're only about 3 years away from that. The actual migration to the modern SAP for HANA could actually take several years and several millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so this natural upgrade cycle kind of represents a cliff for anyone that's on SAP. So some of the folks on this call are probably familiar with some of the challenging realities of managing SAP because usually SAP is procured and then it gets customized. And these organizations write lots and lots and lots of custom code to handle things like bills of materials or warehousing or changing their income statements or finance statements or things of that nature. And there tends to be this very, very sort of legacy experience. And so the biggest challenge is the difficulty in innovating, the difficulty in actually updating these customizations or even just modifying them. You need to have someone that is a pro developer that can write custom code against your SAP. But the problem is if that person leaves, then you have this sort of technical debt that's kind of sitting there. And eventually this sort of continues to snowball and snowball. A lot of times this technology is fairly inefficient or fairly legacy. Modern ERP processes require connections between all kinds of different systems of records, but legacy technology doesn't tend to keep up with these demands. A lot of pieces of an SAP were actually acquired, and so they don't necessarily sit on the same code base or the same data model, and they're all storing data kind of in these silos, which results in lots and lots of manual effort to rectify the data, unite it, or manage it. So you don't have that situational awareness of all of the information being in a single place to kind of see what it is that you need to learn to make these big decisions. And then finally, poor experiences. A lot of the SAP screens are not meant to be customized at all, which is very, very different than modern technology, especially low-code technology like ServiceNow, where modifying a ServiceNow user experience is a simple drag and drop process. With SAP, there tends to be sort of one way to do things, one kind of experience, and there's a lot of headache involved in trying to change that experience to fit your specific use case. And so modern ERP operations require a single layer of action and engagement. So we tend to see that you're not necessarily ever going to rip out your ERP and replace it with a low-code platform. But what you can do is actually extend it using a low-code platform to improve all of the three things that we're talking about in this slide. So why is it so difficult? So with SAP and with Oracle and with really any ERP, we tend to have these core modules. And the core modules are things like bill of materials, warehousing, general ledger, things that are best practices within the industry. But as we know, business processes and business requirements tend to be bigger than just these small core modules, or not these small core modules, these individual core modules. And so we tend to see either point tools crop up to address the missing pieces of those core modules, or we see an overloaded ERP core that's full of customizations, where I needed to write a custom script to modify my bill of materials, or I needed to create a new custom screen in HTML because now we have a different group of people that needs a different experience or different buttons. I'm creating new data fields, new data models, and eventually it creates a great deal of clutter. The challenge is these customizations don't go with SAP when you move to the cloud and when you move to S/4HANA. And so they have to be replaced with something. To unwind and refactor all of this custom code dependencies and migrations would take literally thousands of man days and hundreds of thousands of people hours. So we have this goal of we have to get into the cloud, we have to move to modern SAP, we have to move to modern Oracle, and we have to adhere to this clean ERP core because everything else is not going to go with us. So how do we get all these customizations out of SAP in a way that doesn't denigrate our functionality and a way that's future-proofed? And so that's really where ServiceNow comes in. So ServiceNow, specifically with SAP, has a way to scan your SAP instance and identify the customizations that would be best suited to actually go to ServiceNow. So just to back up a little bit, what exactly is ServiceNow? ServiceNow is a single low-code platform for workflow automation. So you may actually know us from our IT service management. You may have heard of our HR capabilities, but everything we do is on a single Gartner Quadrant leading low-code, no-code platform. Our second most common solution within the federal space is actually our low-code platform being used to customize and configure custom applications. So across my organization, we have groups that do investigative case management using our low-code platform. We have people that do travel requests. We even have scientists that do tissue request samples on ServiceNow. So any kind of custom workflow that you could think of, government organizations are probably doing it on ServiceNow. And so what ServiceNow can contribute is instead of refactoring all those heavy customizations by writing more code, you can leverage a low-code, no-code platform, hook into the data that already lives in SAP, and remove those customizations from SAP and put them into ServiceNow in the form of a low-code application. So you're actually retiring those customizations, replacing them with lightweight low-code applications that are scalable and secure, and then leaving SAP to do what it does best, which is those core modules, general ledger, things of that nature. So you're not ripping out SAP, you're actually sort of cleaning it out and replacing it with ServiceNow. One other really cool thing you can do with ServiceNow is diagnose SAP. So we'll actually run a scan of your SAP instance, and it will provide a stack ranking of the best customizations, the best candidates to be migrated to ServiceNow. So you could go into ServiceNow and have this sort of updated low-code user experience, build out your workflows using low-code, no-code, very, very quickly and rapidly modify and create applications as needed, and then just hook the data model back into SAP. So you might actually drive users to, say, a time and reporting application that lives within ServiceNow, but the data is going back into SAP, the clean core module, because we have to pay those people based on their time. So we have to do payroll and things like that. The user may not actually know they're accessing SAP data. All they're necessarily seeing is ServiceNow. And so once you have looked into your diagnosis, we will give you this sort of stack ranking of the customizations. If there's no out-of-the-box solution, you can digitize it using ServiceNow. So our creative workflows is our catch-all term to build low-code applications on ServiceNow. But if you have a best-of-breed ERP that would be met out of the box, you could simply migrate it over there. So you might be using, might move to ADP for payroll or Workday for something within HR. Or you might just be using those clean core SAP modules for what they're intended to be done. So you kind of branch all these customizations out based on what they are and what they fit into. So how does this actual diagnosis work? It'll identify and prioritize your custom code targets. It'll actually look into the processes. So it'll look into the logs and check process deficiencies, what might not be automated, where the most manual processes might live. And then you can actually track those SAP modernizations with data-driven insights. So Daniel will show you a little bit of it, but this is an example. We call it customization mining. You can actually see the movement of actions and the movement of data through the system. So you may not be aware that sometimes a start and then an order goes directly to purchase order rather than going through delivery, goods movement, finish, intercompany invoice, things of that nature. So this will give you the how things actually run within SAP versus the how they should be. What would be your ideal process? Is this something that we want? So you can actually start to look at the transaction codes, the business process steps, and then figure out how you can sort of refine those processes. So then when you transform to that lean ERP, start to look at those non-core customizations, replace with your best-of-breed solutions when possible, re-platform the rest with low code, and then leave the core ERP modules within SAP where they are much, much easier to migrate. So this reduces the effort it will take to move to modern SAP because all these customizations, you don't have to worry about them coming with them. They now live in ServiceNow, they live in another ERP solution, and all that's left are those core modules that you then lift and shift into S/4HANA. And so this is the build tools. We'll talk a little bit about that today. App Engine Studio is our main way of building low-code, no-code applications. So when you're moving these customizations in the ServiceNow platform, you're likely going to leverage App Engine Studio. And so it's an app development experience that walks you through the 4 steps of creating an application: the data, the user experience, the workflow, and the security. And so you can build from scratch. You can use some of our pre-built templates for things like travel requests, so on and so forth. And studies have shown that you can actually build these applications around 4 times as fast as custom code. And I've actually worked with developers in the past. Many of them have actually confirmed this 4 times faster. They said, we built this app in half a day with ServiceNow. It probably would have taken me 2 days to build within .NET. So, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about why that actually is possible and how that actually looks, we're happy to take any questions now or take that offline as well. So to give you a couple of examples of other organizations using these capabilities today, this is a branch of military that, the specifics are a little bit confidential, but they essentially use App Engine and ServiceNow to help track a lot of their assets. And so this is taking data not only from their ERP system, but also from a few other legacy systems that do asset tracking, but centralizing all of that into a single experience. So you have this fleet service management offer that is actually optimized for mobile. So when people are in the field, when they need to request vehicles or aircraft or spacecraft, or they need to request parts, they have a real-time situational awareness of where everything that they own is located in the world. This is obviously sample data. So this is not where our actual naval resources are shown. And so once again, instead of writing custom code or trying to customize SAP to do this, they used our low-code, no-code platform where it's very easy and flexible to change any workflow or change that user experience. And then they're using SAP for what it's intended to be, this sort of system of record, with ServiceNow being the system of engagement and automation. And this, really would take probably 5 times as long to do with custom code as you could probably do it within ServiceNow. Another example, this is a government defense agency working with one of our partners. They created a Agile layer engagement that they called sort of wrapped SAP with App Engine. And so they not only connected SAP into App Engine, they also used robotic process automation and have created a G invoice. So they created a central invoicing system. So it sounds like their specific SAP instance wasn't handling invoicing the way that they wanted to. Maybe it didn't follow their process. Maybe it wasn't centralized or automated. So the invoicing system lives within ServiceNow App Engine, but it's still pushing that data back into SAP where necessary. The last one we'll talk about is supplier journal entry. So once again, another back office type of application that you probably see within the ERP. They probably had to collect specific information about their suppliers that, once again, may not come out of the box within SAP. So you end up writing all these custom workflows or customizations within the data so that you adhere to FAR regulations, government regulations about suppliers, things of that nature. And instead, let's put all that configuration within App Engine. And once again, move that journal entry app into a cloud-based low-code platform while pushing that data back into SAP and making their life a little bit easier so far. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Daniel.
Thank you, Parker. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Bowling. I'm a solution consultant here at ServiceNow. And I specialize in our low-code, no-code capabilities for building apps on ServiceNow. I've worked in the low-code space for the U.S. federal government for about 7 years now. Before ServiceNow, I was actually a federal employee at Customs and Border Protection, helping manage a team that delivered low-code applications. So I'm excited to talk about ServiceNow's low-code capabilities and specifically about what all of this looks like in action, what Parker was describing of our ERP modernization assistance, how we help connect to your ERP environment, scan it, identify potential candidates for customization to bring into ServiceNow, and how those get built out. I'll share my screen. I've got just a couple slides. I'm going to spend most of the time in the actual platform doing the demo, but just to kind of orient us, we have our external ERP system. In this case, what I'm going to demo today is of a connection to an SAP system, but it could be any general ERP system. So ERP Canvas is our terminology for our product, where we kind of organize all of the ERP models and create those relationships. ERP customization mining is where we scan those existing customizations in your ERP environment and identify the best candidates that could be brought over into ServiceNow to be built in App Engine over here. So I will pull up my demo instance here in the ERP Canvas. So this is the ERP Canvas workspace. And we've got 4 different tabs over here on the left-hand side. So the first tab that I'm in right now is showing me all the ERP models. So almost all of these were ported over automatically from an SAP environment. And so I know we had a few ERP admins or former admins or developers on the call. So if you were working in SAP, some of these model names might look very familiar, brought over from an SAP environment. I can open up one of these models. I'll open up SAP material stock, for example. I can see some information about that model in these different tabs up here. I'll click over to the model tables. So I can see we've got 3 different tables that were pulled over as part of this model. These names are their names in that SAP environment. So you can see that these aren't super intuitive names. So that's part of when we bring it over, we can actually give them more common language names, easily interpretable by developers. We can see the fields in these tables. So here's a good example. Here's what the field names are in their parent environment, or in the environment that we're pulling from. But because these are default fields in SAP, we've renamed them over here to something a little bit more intuitive. And then we can also see how the tables in this model are joined together and any join conditions that might exist for them. So those are a lot of the models that come ported over automatically, depending on which type of ERP environment you're connected to. We can create our own models from scratch, where we identify which tables should be part of it and create those joins between them. Or probably more frequently, easier to clone an existing model and then edit it by adding more tables, removing tables, editing the joins to create the data models here in ServiceNow. So the data models are essentially just made up of tables and relationships between those tables. To see more information specifically on the tables brought over, we have two types of tables: remote tables and extraction tables. I'll show extraction tables first, just because I'll save remote tables because I think they're super cool. Extraction tables here are tables that we scanned in SAP and actually brought over into the ServiceNow instance. So all of these tables exist in ServiceNow. We go through a little transform map that's like ServiceNow lingo, basically, for an ETL process, extract, transform, load, where we take the data as it exists and as it's formatted in SAP, and then map it to a table that we created in ServiceNow, so that that data ports over smoothly and seamlessly. So I can open up one of those tables, that SAP material stock table, and I can see all of the fields that were ported over. And this is going to be refreshed on some sort of schedule that we want to set for how often that data is ported over from the SAP environment into ServiceNow. So these are all of our extraction tables. Now, remote tables, this is not us bringing over all of the data and migrating it into ServiceNow, but actually just establishing a live connection between ServiceNow and, in this case, the SAP environment. So the actual data lives in SAP, but we've created kind of like a dummy virtual table within ServiceNow that mirrors that actual table living in SAP. But then once we have that kind of, I call it a virtual table in ServiceNow, the remote table, we're able to actually build off of it as if it was a real table in ServiceNow. And so I'll show a little bit more about how that can really play out. But it's a super cool concept. It's a table that actually sits in SAP, but we can build visualizations off of it. We can build automations off of it. We can build off of it in ServiceNow as if it was actual ServiceNow data. So that's what all of these tables are. These are all ERP remote tables that are actually sitting in ServiceNow. We have a link to actually view any of the tables that we want to, which model they're a part of. So I can open any of these up. And again, I see the table fields that are sitting in SAP, but we're connected to via direct connection here. And then finally, my fourth tab, this is just a check of all the ERP systems. So you can connect to multiple different ERP systems. I just have the one SAP system connected. We can see that it is successfully connected. Latest heartbeat was earlier today. Just to check on the status of those ERP systems. So this is kind of like just kind of documentation around the data models and the data tables that have been identified in the SAP instance, and either ported over into ServiceNow or a remote table has been set up, and how those tables are related to each other. That's what the ERP canvas is all about. So it's kind of like the foundational building block of connecting ServiceNow to that ERP environment. I'm seeing a question from Matthew in the Q&A. What are customers using to integrate back to SAP and other ERP platforms? How is governance handled with existing iPaaS platforms and standards? We'll make sure we come back to that at the end of the demo here. I have a slide that goes into a little bit more technical detail about how that's accomplished. Good, very good question. So that was ERP Canvas. The next, and this is where it gets a little bit cooler, in my opinion, is the ERP customization mining. So I have a little bit of an example, kind of like process diagram of how this might flow. We have an SI and Ellen, who's like at the, within the organization is managing the SAP migration, has to move from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. But, like Parker was mentioning, some of those customizations built on SAP ECC won't migrate to S/4HANA automatically. So she needs help identifying what those customizations are and where they exist within the SAP environment. And then, determine whether or not using a different platform or new capabilities is suitable to help bring those customizations out of SAP and into a new platform. So that's where we scan the instance, we get the ERP canvas set up, and then identify customization candidates to build out in ServiceNow to assist with that SAP upgrade. And that's where I'll hop into the ERP customization mining dashboard. So this happens automatically based off of the connection with your, in this case, SAP environment and the scan that has been done of all of the custom code within that SAP environment. We can see we have different candidates, different customization candidates that can be reviewed to potentially be brought out of SAP and into ServiceNow. So grouped into some different modules by those ERP modules. So these might look, again, familiar to some of our SAP aficionados. On the left-hand side, I'm going to click on this candidates view to just see all of the individual customization candidates that we're going to be evaluating here. And importantly, we have the potential level. So potential level, high means it looks like a very good fit to bring into ServiceNow. And that's primarily based on the data that is required to build out this customization that was identified in SAP ECC. So in this case, I can click on this, this candidate, and I see the description of what it does. It reads the bill of materials item, a few different, it just kind of reads a few different modules within, or tables within the SAP environment, within the production module. I can see the scan results of which tables are required to build out this functionality, the similar functionality in ServiceNow. I also have usage information, which can be really important, especially like for prioritizing which customization candidates you want to build out first. So in this case, we have got 22 users, 10 of them are active or have used the application recently and 12 not recently. We can see maybe if we pick this candidate to bring out of SAP first, we can see some other similar candidates. But then what I think is probably the coolest part of this is the actual recommendations. So we can see it's recommending use a remote table to read the bill of materials data, and then build an app to view the bill of materials through App Engine as our two recommended actions to bring this customization out of SAP and into ServiceNow. So that it really just tries to make it as easy as possible for you, right? Like potential level, so high. So we've got potentially really good fit to bring into ServiceNow with a pretty low level of effort. So you can select this as a potential candidate. And then on the home screen again, we'll see that appear in our selected potential candidates. So we kind of identify a short list of candidates to potentially bring over into ServiceNow. And if you're familiar with SAP, you probably see how valuable this could be. It's kind of difficult to scan an SAP environment and understand where those customizations are, and then much more difficult to understand what they do and if their requirements map well to a third-party system like ServiceNow. So that's what this tool is all designed to do for you. So the final part of the demo here, let's say Ellen has selected some candidates to move outside of SAP, has received approval from her manager. And so she has presented those customization candidates to bring into ServiceNow, and then a selected one to actually bring over. So now we move into the actual modernization portion. Everything up to this point has just been identifying what the customizations are and what are a good fit for moving into ServiceNow. Then when it comes to actually building out those customizations in ServiceNow, that's where we pivot into what Parker was describing earlier, App Engine Studio, and those really intuitive low-code, no-code build tools to put that functionality into ServiceNow. So I won't bother like walking through this whole process flow, but basically it's describing Ellen building the application that was described from the customization mining, showing it to John approving it, the app getting deployed in ServiceNow, and of course, everyone happy at the end. So I want to show an example of one of these apps that was created in my demo instance here, based off of the recommendations from the customization mining. So here we have our manufacturing operations dashboard. So this was a dashboard that used to live in SAP, but we've got the data available to us in ServiceNow. So we built that dashboard here in ServiceNow. So within App Engine Studio, I'll just kind of really briefly go over this. We've got 4 pillars of every application. We have the data, the actual underlying data that's powering the app. Experience, any form or screen that a user is actually interacting with, like a dashboard. Logic and automation, this is where the actual kind of automated process is described and then performed. And security. So data, we have one extra table that we're using here, but for the most part, we're using the actual remote tables from SAP for this dashboard. I'm going to show an experience in a second. I do want to just open up a logic and automation example. In case you haven't seen, I saw we had a couple people not familiar with ServiceNow. This screen is called Flow Designer, and this is like our no-code, low-code way of building automations. So every flow consists of a trigger and then associated actions. So this trigger this flow just runs daily at noon. It could be triggered by an actual event within the platform or external to the platform. But what we do here is we update disruption alerts data. So we look at all of our disruption alerts and then go through. Here we actually go through the materials, the stock material in our SAP instance to update them with any subsequent information about a disruption alert. So maybe there's a disruption alert about a plant being down for 2 hours last night due to some emergency event that happened. this flow would run and then update the bill of materials for all of those stock items that would have been impacted by that plant going down. So that's just an example of a flow and how we can kind of loop through some traditional like development logic for each if-then statements, how that comes together. Fourth and final pillar of our apps are security. So this is where we define the different types of users that will interact with the application, and then what permission each type of user should have within the application. That is all I will kind of go into about what it's like to actually build. But I'll show an example of this. Here's a manufacturing operations and alerts dashboard. Used to be an SAP, we brought over into ServiceNow. So the idea here is we can surface to the user alerts. In this case, we're bringing in alerts from the National Weather Service, or GDAC, about events that have taken place that might impact our manufacturing operations. And we have of course, a map view showing our international manufacturing operations and what's going on where. So we can see this first one here. A volcanic eruption is ongoing in Germany, France, Poland. I can click on that. And here I see where that event took place. It's categorized as severe in the potential impact area, which would be like kind of a huge volcano. I feel like if a volcano erupted that actually impacted this much area, we'd probably be like heading into another ice age or something. But customer first. So in terms of how that would impact manufacturing operations at our hypothetical company, what we can do here is we can see more information, see the source, latitude and longitude of the location, some categorization, and a description of what's happening. But then more importantly for us, we can see which assets of ours are at risk based off of, we have a directory of all of our assets and the where they live. So I can click on this to see the 3 different plants that could be impacted by this volcanic eruption. And then some more information about them. I can open any one of them up to see kind of more information about them here, which product they make, for example. So I'll jump back to the dashboard, and here are those 3 plants in our map view. And then based off of the impact area, so we've identified these 3 plants as potentially impacted. So we've got suggested actions down here. So we can notify stakeholders. If I want to click notify, this will automatically select the owners, whoever's marked as like an owner of all of those assets. So in this case, these are 3 plants. So it'd be like the plant administrator. And then we can manually add any additional users if we know we want to notify any additional people. Click next. And we can actually send an email from ServiceNow here. The subject is automatically populated with the emergency information. We can type out what we want the email body to be and actually send this notification to those users. And we also have another suggested action to declare a crisis event. There's a separate workflow that we developed here for what it means to declare a crisis event. So that action could be triggered here. From within ServiceNow to mark all of these plant locations in crisis mode, and then the associated like flow that happens as part of that. One thing I think is pretty convenient, we can edit the impact area as well. So right now, this is like kind of a huge impact area, in my opinion, for a volcanic eruption. So if we want to customize the radius there, we can just shrink this impact area down, save that. Now we only have 1 plant location that's actually being impacted by this event. So pausing here, next I'm going to jump over into the operations view. So our operations view is another version of this, another view within this dashboard. Here we have a bunch of like visualizations based off of the data that's actually living in SAP. So we can see our production orders by region, and then some of our production actual scheduling by day, week, and month here. And then special orders and production plan by status year to date. We also have a calendar view. So we can see all of the production activities happening within any given month or week, and see information about them over here. So really the key here, I mean, I'm kind of showing a few different types of artifacts that can be built out in ServiceNow based on the data in SAP. But the key idea here is that you can do that. You can have data living in SAP or automatically ported over into ServiceNow from SAP and build very nice, very intuitive user experiences in ServiceNow using ServiceNow's low code, no code capabilities against that actual really, really valuable organizational data that's sitting in SAP or whatever other ERP system you might be modernizing. And so with that, I will leave off with this slide here. Again, reviewing, we've got that external system, the ERP system. Canvas kind of creates that directory. I've been looking for that word the whole time. Is a directory of the ERP models and tables that have been read in from that ERP environment. Customization mining is where we actually scan for customizations that exist in that ERP environment today. We rate them based off of how easily they could be brought over into ServiceNow. And then App Engine is what we build. Those customizations could map to one of ServiceNow's out-of-the-box offerings, which is great. But if they don't, if it is still kind of a custom use case, those can be built out using App Engine, which is what I was just demoing, was a dashboard, a kind of solution that was built out using App Engine on ServiceNow. So I think we can open it back up for questions. And while everyone's thinking if they have any questions or anything to go into further, I'm going to pull up this a little bit more of a technical architecture slide. But there was a question earlier that I think this might help answer kind of how we connect to, in this case, SAP ECC, and then eventually SAP S/4HANA. Because the key thing here is, right, if we're all about enabling the modernization, enabling this migration from ECC to S/4HANA, we make that connection to ECC from ServiceNow using that ERP canvas. Initially through this mid server and some of the additional protocols that are used here. So we're read into those models living in SAP ECC, but then when that migration happens to S/4HANA, we're still read into those same models through a mid server, but now where the customizations got stripped away. That's why we build the customizations out in App Engine. So they're like front end kind of versions, and the automations associated with that customization built out in App Engine are initially reading from SAP ECC, but then are switched over to S/4HANA once that migration occurs. So that's kind of the idea, is that the data is continuing to live in SAP, but those customizations are built out in App Engine, so they're not affected by that migration. Got the chat up there. I'll stop sharing now. We can go into Q&A mode. I see some more activity in the chat and questions. Workshops that we offer to actually get any open to anyone in the federal government, employees or partners, to actually get hands-on and build applications live with us. We do that in the Vienna office. I'll look for a registration link to put that in the chat.
All right. Well, if that wraps up our content, I will hand it back to our host from Carousel.
Thank you, team. I'd like to thank all of our participants as well as our speakers for being with us today. We hope this information that you received during this webinar has been helpful. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.